You know, when we think about wild tribes, we usually picture people barely wearing any clothes, battling the heat and bugs in the jungle, right? But here's something interesting. There are tribes living in the Arctic, in freezing cold conditions with glaciers and snow that never melt. Just imagine, it's not just about finding food, but surviving in temperatures that can drop to minus 70 degrees Celsius. Today I'm going to tell you about these people who face super extreme conditions. And hey, by the end you'll hear about an amazing tribe that stood up to Russia for over 200 years, and even influenced the sale of Alaska. Let's get into it. So, let's talk about the Yagans. Ever heard of Tierra del Fuego? It's a kind of mysterious place full of islands at the end of the world near Antarctica. Just imagine, rocky coasts, towering cliffs, and sparse vegetation, all under freezing winds and surrounded by icebergs all year round. Despite this super hostile climate, this archipelago was home to the Yagan people until the early 20th century, when they practically vanished. The first Europeans to run into them were around the 15th century, when the German naturalist Georg Forster, who was on James Cook's expedition, encountered them. Forster reported that even with the extreme cold, the Yagans lived practically naked, wearing only small pieces of fur, slept on rocks without any issues, and made very basic shelters with branches and skins. Every night they lit bonfires that could be seen from afar by passing ships. But despite such a tough life, the Yagans stayed off the researchers' radar for quite a while. The Russian explorer Otto von Kotzebue even suggested that they might have lived further south but moved north due to conflicts with other tribes. What a story, right? You know that story about the Yagans, a people who lived in super cold regions? Well, scientists have been studying them and found some really interesting things. On the outside, they might look a bit like the Amazonian Indians, but that's where the similarities end. The Yagans had an extra layer of fat under their skin, which really helped them handle the intense cold. And it's not just that. The bulkier ones were the ones who survived the best, showing that nature kind of picked that body type as ideal for surviving there. And there's more. Anthropologist Stanislav Drobovsky talked about other adaptations they had that are mind-blowing. Their blood vessels were more hidden and deeper in their bodies, a real masterstroke by nature to keep the heat in and protect vital organs. Just imagine, all these genetic changes helping them live in the ice without major problems. Pretty fascinating, right? When we talk about people living way up in the far north, we automatically think of Eskimos, right? They're spread out in really cold places like Greenland, Canada, Alaska, and even on the Chukotka Peninsula in Russia. Eskimos are part of a group called Arctic Mongoloids, according to scientists. By the way, did you know that the term Eskimo has a pretty curious origin? It comes from Eskiman, an indigenous word meaning person who eats raw fish. This name is still used in Chukotka and some islands in the Far East, as well as various areas in Alaska. But they themselves prefer to be called Yupik, which means real person. And get this, there are about 170,000 Eskimos in total, with most of them in Greenland and Alaska. In Russia, there are only around 1,500. It's pretty interesting to think about how this culture stays alive in such extreme conditions. You know what life is like in an Eskimo community? It's super interesting. They live together, kind of like one big camp. Usually several families share the same space, which makes everything more close-knit. Within each family, you'll find not just the couple and their kids, but also other close relatives. When it's time to sleep, it's common for the couples and their kids to stay in the center of the house, while the single folks stay more on the edges. As for marriage, they're usually loyal to one partner, but sometimes a guy might have two wives. Despite this flexibility, divorces are rare there. They really value harmony and the well-being of the community above all. It's a different way of living, but it seems to work for them, keeping everyone together and focused on the common good. You know the vibe in some communities where everyone helps each other out? Well, in certain societies, they take that super seriously. Like they hunt together and share whatever they get, whether it's food or resources. And there are basic rules everyone follows, kind of like those good neighbor agreements, you know? For instance, no one can just decide to build a house without talking to everyone first. It's like everyday democracy. And when someone has a good hunt, it's not just for them. The meat and fish are shared with those in need. This helps keep everyone well fed and prevents hunger. Oh, and if someone wants to live and hunt away from the group, they can do that too. Plus, if you find something lost out there, you can keep it for yourself. And get this, when hunting isn't going well, the families who are doing better invite others over for dinner so no one goes without. It's a system of mutual help that really seems to work. You know what Eskimo life is like? It's pretty different from what we're used to. They don't have formal organizations to solve problems. Everything is resolved on the spot and among themselves. There's no room for fights or conflicts because in such a limited area, peace is essential. Even their languages don't have swear words and crime is almost non-existent. In very rare cases of serious crimes like homicide, they have a blood revenge rule that requires the victim's relatives to take justice into their own hands. Although harsh, it helps maintain order and tranquility. In Eskimo families, traditions are very strict, especially for women. Before getting married, a girl needs approval from her parents and sometimes her brothers. If her parents don't approve, she continues living with them. And there's more. Although it might seem shocking, a man can capture a girl to marry her, but only with her parents' permission, not hers. Wedding ceremonies are simple. The girl just takes her belongings to her new home. Once married, her life is one of great submission to her husband and mother-in-law, with little room for her own opinions. Men even have the right to punish their wives for any slip-up. But interestingly, children are never punished. It's a way of living that might seem very strange to us, but it's normal for them. In the past, life for these reindeer herders was brutally tough. Many men lost their lives during hunts, leaving women to lead the family. Today, the elders are still highly respected, even if there are occasional disagreements. It's a fascinating culture, don't you think? Living in the Arctic is a real challenge, and up there, cooperation is essential, no matter who you are or where you're from. On your own, you just wouldn't survive. The main dangers are reckless behavior, laziness, and irresponsibility, which can be fatal in that environment. Speaking of the Athabascans, an ethnic group living far north in America, they have a super strong connection with nature, perfectly adapted to survive the Arctic cold. They build their houses semi-underground, which is genius because it keeps the place warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Athabascan culture is rich and full of traditions. For instance, they place a lot of importance on funeral rituals, treating the soul of the deceased with great respect, believing it is purified by fire. And when a baby is born, they give them a secret name linked to their protective spirit. They also have really interesting religious beliefs connected to elements of nature and sacred animals, like the raven, which symbolizes wisdom, and the coyote, which represents cunning. They believe that having images of these animals as talismans helps protect against evil spirits. The Athabascans are quite reserved and cautious with strangers, which makes sense since they've faced many losses due to diseases brought by outsiders. Like many isolated tribes, they have little immunity to these external diseases. They're a fascinating people, with unique wisdom for living in one of the most extreme places on the planet. Oh, the Inuit of Canada are fascinating. Did you know that about 64,000 of them live there? Most of them are in Nunavut, that super northern territory. The people there are pretty young, with an average age of just 24. They're also incredibly inventive. Imagine this. They created the first sunglasses using animal bones and antlers. And it doesn't stop there. Snowshoes and kayaks, which everyone uses today, were also their inventions. In Cape Dorset, located in Nunavut, the Inuit are very artistic. They create amazing soapstone sculptures and work with textiles using natural materials. Plus, they are masters of throat singing and make those symbolic stone figures called Inuksuk. The Inuit speak Inuktitut, which has 5 main dialects and even 2 writing systems, one using our Roman alphabet and another syllabic system unique to them. To get around in the snow, they use sleds pulled by Kimik dogs, a breed that's actually endangered. They are natural hunters, capturing everything from wolves and polar bears to seals, walruses, reindeer, and even whales. And their food? It's pretty unique, from dried reindeer meat to raw seal brain and caribou liver. It's all a significant part of their culture. It's a totally different world, right? Oh, the Sami. They're a super interesting ethnic group from Northern Europe. Most of them live in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. For a long time, they were called Lapps, a term that started with the Vikings and was adopted by the Scandinavians and Russians to refer to them. This history even influenced the name of the region, Lapland, which you might know as Santa Claus's home, who is also considered Sami, believe it or not. The origin of the Sami is kind of a mystery to historians. They have a history of living off fishing, hunting, and gathering long before external influences. Over time, they were pushed further north by Slavic and Finno-Ugric tribes. Besides dealing with invaders, the Sami faced serious issues with alcoholism, worsened by traders who used alcohol to manipulate them in negotiations. And it doesn't stop there. The Sami were also driven out of their traditional lands. And hey, the climate isn't the only harsh thing there. In southern Lapland, they faced assimilation attempts by the Swedish and Norwegian governments. These governments wanted them to fully integrate, even trying to change their language through schools in a process you could call Swedification. It's a story of resistance in an already tough environment. Did you know that for the Sami to have the right to a piece of land, they had to change their names and learn Norwegian? Meanwhile, in Finland, the Finnicization policy was a bit more lenient, but it still had a significant impact on Sami culture and language in the three countries where they live. Nowadays, the Sami are working hard to preserve and pass on their traditions and cultural identity. But with all these modern influences around, it's tough to resist and not be swayed a bit, right? Now, switching topics, let's talk about the Tlingit, a tribe from Alaska. They gave a major empire a run for their money, and their resistance lasted until the early 21st century, believe it or not. Their fight against Russia went on for almost 202 years. Before the Europeans and Russians arrived, the Tlingit ruled the region. They were known for being very aggressive and war-focused. The name Tlingit simply means person. The Russians even gave them some nicknames because of their peculiar customs, like wearing ornaments on their lower lips, which imagine made eating quite complicated. The Tlingit of Alaska, a tribe with incredible physical resilience. From a young age, they get used to the biting cold of the region's seas and rivers, which pretty much makes them immune to the cold. In the beginning, when the Russians arrived, the Tlingit tried to maintain friendly trade relations. But you know how it goes, misunderstandings started to arise, especially due to some mistakes by the Russian administration and the economic pressure they put on the tribe. There was a war between 1802 and 1805, and after that, things cooled down a bit. The Tlingit stopped large-scale attacks but still ambushed here and there, disrupting the Russians' plans to stabilize the region. This war ended up being a big problem for Russia, which decided to cut its losses by selling Alaska to the United States in 1867. Today, many ethnic groups in the far north, including the Tlingit, are fighting not to disappear. And unfortunately, our modern society doesn't always help keep their ancient traditions and rituals alive. Thanks for your interest, and see you next time.